we also have nonprofit organizations who use our services to track, abuse on social networks. We have farmers and cattle ranchers who track trends and weather, and trajectories on different costs and so on. My name is Aviv Besinsky. I'm a product director at Bright Data. I've been in the company for a very long time, and in terms of tech companies, around 8 years now. And I started my way as an SDR in the sales organization. And I basically climbed my way up through being a project manager, a product manager, and finally, for the past 3 or 4 years, managing our proxy and scraping product group.
Awesome. Can you start off by giving us an overview of Bright Data? What sets Bright Data apart from other collection technologies, and how exactly is infrastructure support, the robust data collection that you guys are doing?
Sure. So Bright Data has been on a mission since day one to basically allow anyone who wants to collect data to be able to do that. And while in the past it was a capability that usually very high-end companies, very robust companies or corporates used to do, our mission was to allow anyone to do it, and that's what's happening today. Small, mom and pop companies, little e-commerce companies, or basically anyone who wants to is able to collect data. And what sets us apart is that we give the full suite of solution, basically. We have infrastructure type of products like proxy networks for customers who want to keep full control on their side, and it goes all the way to just selling data sets. Someone just needs to define what is the data they need, and then they can just buy it and it's all ready. You don't have to do anything. So it's like a spectrum of products. And also what sets us apart is that many companies today offer different solutions which might be similar to what we offer, but we're the only one who usually offers generic solutions. So we're not offering data sets for e-commerce or bypassing blocks for travel sites or anything of that sort. It's always a generic system, and that gives the customer or the company the confidence that they can rely on our services no matter what comes in, which is mainly relevant for those who have a lot of ad hoc use cases or end user triggered use cases. As for the infrastructure, are you referring to our own infrastructure?
Well, just kind of how does the infrastructure play in? For our listeners who are familiar with traditional networks, cloud, can you explain how Bright Data utilizes familiar infrastructure operations, and what's really the key components that handle the data collection?
Well, generally speaking, the data collection is being done on the customer side, not on our side. We give the infrastructure to go through, but we have huge amounts of data going through our system. So infrastructure is a big challenge. We have, last time I checked, was around 30 or 40 petabytes of traffic going per month. So that's pretty big. I think once someone checked it and said that it's more than the Google queries and the search queries, in a given month.
That's crazy.
So that's big data. That means big challenges, and we constantly upgrade. So I've been in the company for, like I said, for 8 years, and I keep seeing how we keep upgrading and changing and redoing our infrastructure using all main providers for cloud instances or for servers or compute or whatnot at huge scales, and finding smart solutions for how we can have stable service but also fast. Like for example, we're having a big focus on speed. Okay, we have all the servers we need. We have auto scaling, but some customers need to open 10,000 browsers immediately. Okay, and they're just one customer. We have thousands more. So how do we have auto scaling that can support peaks which are not like mild peaks, but like very sharp and pointy peaks? So these are the types of challenges. So far, we've done a good job, but traffic keeps growing and demand keeps growing, and we need to find newer solutions all the time.
Let's dive deeper into that a little bit. Can you dive into the technical side? How does Bright Data manage to handle such large-scale data, without compromising speed or quality?
Well, I don't know if it's true to say without compromising, because we evolved. So when we were a smaller company, and this is something that happens to many companies, so our traffic was smaller, and we probably had a terrible infrastructure, but we just didn't know that. And then as we went and became a market leader, traffic keeps growing, and then at some point you realize, okay, this thing I had over here, this infrastructure was good enough for getting started, but now it needs to scale up. So each time we keep changing how it works. And there's also new solutions in the market. So now, for example, we found just now one of the main providers has solutions where they have like spot instances, and then that gives us the option to get better speed, right? If before we were very focused on last year, for example, with the recession and all that, on cost optimization, now we're less focused on that. So we want to find ways to have immediate solutions coming from different compute providers. Now there's a new solution. We're going to take that solution, implement it into our system. We had engineers working for this specific case for a full weekend because there were critical needs depending on that shift. And basically each time it's a different change, but we keep scaling our system. Each time the traffic keeps growing, we find out it's not as good as we thought, and then we find new solutions, and it's like a constant evolution.
Let's talk about some of the alternative ways some of people are using the data that Right Data, has. It's not just about trying to find, do market research for prices, but there's some different ways people are using data, this kind of data. You want to kind of go into a bit of detail about that?
There's many use cases. It's all commercial use cases, okay? Some people hear data collection and they might be thinking about PII, shady use cases, and so on. And this is not what we sell. We don't sell products for that, although I'll be happy to talk later about how we implement tools to prevent that being done from our system. But it's usually commercially oriented. So collecting prices, travel industry, ad tech, there's a full ecosystem around ads, making sure the campaigns are running as they should, where they should, the redirect links are not broken, or things of that sort. Testing automation for websites, consulting companies, and so on. Basically, many of these companies start with a small data collection need, and then they might spin up some, AWS servers without even a proxy and collect data, and that will work for the initial cases. But as they scale up, they understand that it's not working. They're being blocked. Getting blocked by target sites for collecting public web data is very common today. And then they start looking for solutions with Bright Data or companies like Bright Data, and start using proxy products or automated bypassing products or buying data sets and so on.
That's really interesting. Can you dive into like the proxy side, because one thing I think people don't realize is when you are going to do data collection, often your IP address instantly gets blocked and you can no longer collect the data that you're looking for. How does a proxy system help prevent that?
Right. So basically, a proxy network is just a network of many different IPs, and our user will send a request. Depending on the product you're using, we'll route this request through one of these millions of IPs, and they can control the type of an IP they want to use and how do they manage the IPs, let them cool down, blacklist IPs, manage their different sessions depending on their scale. But why do we even need that? So that's a good question. So there's two main reasons. The first reason is that websites have a very basic blocking mechanism, which is either rate limiting or it's around rate limiting. So if a certain IP comes to the site too many times, that raises a flag. Now, it's important to remember that most sites are selling something. Okay, it can be an actual product, it can be a service, it can be advertisements, it can be different things, but they're selling something. So they're going to be very careful before they block an IP. It's not that they're going to immediately, you reach the threshold and you'll be blocked. But if you don't manage your IPs properly, it will happen. And then there's different things that can happen. If you're using, more basic IPs like data center IPs, which are traditionally server IPs, now being used for scraping. So instead of having one IP attached, binded to a server, now you have, 5,000 IPs binded to a server, and then you can go through any of them. We have like 700,000 data center IPs. And what can happen is that one IP will be blocked, and then if the user doesn't properly identify it and manage the IPs, rotate them, put aside that blocked IP, let it cool down, what can happen is that the website will block the entire /24 or /21 or whatnot. And then that's even a bigger problem. So some customers do it on their own, and other customers use our different solutions, different services and tools to help them manage it, or to let us manage the selection of IP and the cooling time and so on. The second reason why you would not need a proxy network is because today, and for a long time now, the internet is not actually transparent. It's more opaque. You can come into a website from the United States or from India, and you'll see a completely different website. very common with travel sites or e-commerce sites, but not only, just even showing the right language in the website is affected by the location of the IP. So when you're collecting data, you're usually oriented towards some audience, and then you want to collect the data from the eyes of a user in that specific location. So that's a second use case for using proxies. And usually you need both cases when doing scraping.
Well, you mentioned earlier the security aspect of, data scraping and stuff. Can you talk a little bit about some of the security measures Bright Data has in place, and how do you ensure not only the integrity of the data, but also the confidentiality, and making sure the wrong data doesn't get into the wrong hands?
Yeah, that's a great question. And Bright Data always had a strong emphasis on compliance. And as the market leader, we're kind of trying to be the lighthouse in this industry. Usually and historically, we've set the standard in terms of compliance and different measures. Let's do a quick run through. We started off with doing a KYC, know your customer. This was the first measure we did, and we've been doing it since day one. Okay, now just to understand the origins of it, back then we only had proxy products. Actually, we had one proxy product. We had the residential network. And we had two compliance-related aspects or security-related aspects. The first one is the KYC. So a customer comes in. Now he's going to be routing proxy traffic, sending HTTPS requests. We are basically facilitating a tunnel and proxying it, but we can't actually see what's going on inside, right? This is why at this point, what we did is a KYC. We're interviewing the customer, asking specific questions, learning what's his use case, and then we either approve it or disapprove it. If we disapprove it, that's it. The customer is disabled. He cannot come back and tell us and give us a new story. That's it. He's done. We were very serious about that. And if the customer does pass the compliance test, the KYC, we would actually cross-check his usage versus his declared use case. If he said he's going to be scraping prices from Amazon, Walmart, and Target, but now we see that he's actually going to Facebook.com, that means something is off. So we start investigating it. We have a dedicated compliance team. If they find something is off, they'll disable that account. If they find it true, they'll update the use case. So that was the very first measure. Now on the other side of the equation, there's the actual source of proxy, source of the peers, of the residential IPs. Our first product was a residential network. And we put a very strong emphasis on where do we source these IPs from. So we have a Bright Data SDK, and we were the first ones to pioneer what we call the ethical peer sourcing. It's like a triangle where there's Bright Data, there's some app owner, app for a smart TV, for a computer, desktop, mobile, different types of apps, and then usually apps are either paid, free, with ads, or that was it back then. And then we came and offered a third option. It's going to be free, no ads, but you're going to let Bright Data use your IP address. And it's with a full consent screen, with full details, full clarity. And not only that, Bright Data has very extreme rules to when they can actually use the peer. Okay, they cannot use it when the device is being used at all. It has to be in sleep mode, connected to Wi-Fi, so you don't consume anything if it's a mobile device of the mobile package. You cannot be consuming more than some small percent, even when working on the background of the device, and many, many more rules. And only when all rules are met and all stars are aligned, we can go through that peer. And the performance-related result of that is that we do have many peers, but usually can't use a peer for more than a few minutes because it has to be exactly according to these rules. So that's where we started from. Okay, that's the peer sourcing, ethical peer sourcing, the KYC. And then as time went, we started adding more and more ways for us to proactively make sure that only ethical and legitimate usage is going through our product. So we started adding things like site classification. Okay, we have, I think the number is every day there's 300,000 new domains to classify or something of that sort, something, huge. And we classify all these domains, and we have internal logic saying which classifications are legitimate and which are not. If it's not legitimate, can't send that request through us. Doesn't even matter who you are. There's nothing to explain. We don't ask anyone. We just do it. Okay. And that means we're blocking business from our side, preventing business from ourselves. But we want to keep legitimate usage. And then we have another system we built a few years ago. We call it the Site Health Monitor. So basically, the way it works is that we track the health of all of our target sites. Okay, we track their RTT, we see their response time, and then if something happens and the response starts dropping, we immediately start throttling requests. And we also check if it's related to traffic coming from us or not in a specific location in the world. But in any case, our system learns the rate limits, and next time it will just not get to these limits to begin with. And the final step, which is something that we're building now, is called Bright Shield. And this is like, in terms of our ecosystem, a very extreme measure, but this is what we believe. And like I said, we want to be the market leader in these standards. So we're basically allowing two things. First of all, site owners can do monitoring through us on their own assets. So they can see what traffic is coming into their assets, define rate limits, basically apply our site health monitor to their specific endpoints. We're going to monitor their general site anyway, but they can do it for specific endpoints in their site. That's one, and also see stats. And the second part is that the customers themselves that do scraping get the option to monitor and have better control whether they're scraping what is allowed to be scraped. I mean, internally, because big companies have sometimes messy scraping operations, things happen which are not planned. We help them monitor and govern that and have alerts and so on. And we're now working on the next phase of that product suite, which will allow, for example, identifying when there's PII unintentionally in your scraping results, remove that before it ever gets to you, the customer, or scan for antivirus and things of that sort. So it's a full scope of capabilities, and we keep adding more and more. Yeah, so I think that was really a deep dive.
And one thing that you touched on, and I know can be a big concern for people, is the ethics around data scraping. Let's talk about a bit of how Bright Data ensures that operations comply with international data protection regulations such as like GDPR and CCPA.
Right. So we actually like very much these different regulations or things like GDPR, for example, because unlike other areas which are vague, things like GDPR come with a handbook and they're very straightforward. And really all you need to do is just read it and apply it. Okay. And if you already decide that you want to do it, then it's really easy. You just need to decide you want to do it, and that's it. GDPR, for example, requires things regarding PII, and Bright Data generally doesn't do data collection. It only gives tools for others to collect using our tools, but we do also sell data sets. So for example, if in our data set we identify we have PII, we'll send a notification to the owner of that information, and he has the option to click a button and have it deleted and so on. Very standard things that come from GDPR. We have compliance monitoring or audits done by external companies every year, and any rejects they have, we apply to our system. So kind of corporate governing measures that we're taking. Very straightforward. There's nothing to invent here. It's all written down.
Looking towards the future of data collection, are there any exciting projects or innovations that you can talk about that really get you excited, about the future of data collection?
Well, we already have the main tools for doing data collection. We have the proxies, we have automated unblocking, we have data sets. One thing that we're really kind of focusing as one of our next steps is taking the leap forward to give better tools for data validation, which is a big challenge. Okay, so just last week I was in the United States and Canada meeting customers, and repetitive feedback is that customers who tend to have a need for tight control over their data collection are happy to have solutions that bypass automatically any blocking of public web data scraping, but they're always going to be concerned, and they always put a lot of resources on how do they validate that the data they collected is actually real data. It's very common today for sites to not block you, because then that's easy. Now you're blocked, you can start finding a way to work around that, but instead send you false information. It's very hard to detect, and today there's no good automated solution for that. Customers have, or companies have, fleets of analysts doing manual QA and finding or verifying the data is true. And we're trying to think of ways on how we can give them tools to basically do easy QA. We're not going to fully automate the QA on our side for them, but we're going to give them tools to easily do it with our product. So for example, We have a Web Unlocker product. You make a simple proxy request. Web Unlocker does magic in the background, decides which network to use, which headers to use, to spin up a browser or not, cooling time of the IPs, which country to use, many, many things in the toolbox, all done automatically. And one of the things that we're going to allow customers to do is, for example, to send an API call, say, here's a URL, and here's an element that we are expecting to see in that page. If that element doesn't come back, whatever comes back is wrong. We don't care what comes back. And then our system can build around that. It's automation and make sure they always get that element back. Or the other way around, they can say, if this element is over here, like sometimes you go to Amazon to a product page, there's a puppy, when the product is out of stock or something. So they can say, if this element comes back, that means it's probably a block. So we want to reject that. Different things of that sort. So these are the next step we're looking at. Right now, we're also working on combining the browser automation to our products. So we have the scraping browser, which is a browser with built-in proxies and unlocking. We're going to soon start offering our proxy networks together with browsers with no additional cost. So we're doing kind of a evolution in that sense with these products.
Interesting. And I'm curious, what from like a consumer side, you mentioned that you have like residential scrapers and in the proxy network. Is there a certain incentive for them to, have that on their network?
Well, the incentive for the IP owner to allow us to go through his IP is that ethical SDK peer sourcing I described earlier. Mm-hmm. The end user basically comes to some app. He downloads an app from his phone or in his smart TV or his computer. And then he's being asked, do you want to see ads or do you want to pay for this app? Or a third option, do you want to allow bright data to go through your IP under very specific rules, all clear to the user? And then many users choose to opt in. These users are peers in our residential network. We also have static networks, which are different. We have the data center network. We have ISP IPs, which are coming from ISPs, but in a static data center-like infrastructure. So that's a different case, of course.
That makes sense. So also one thing, we talked about offline a little bit is, and you mentioned purchasing data sets is how it's being used to shape the future of AI. AI is kind of one of those current buzzwords that everyone's talking about. How do you guys figure out what data is appropriate for that, for like training AI models, or is it just purely whatever the designers of that AI are requesting?
We never assume for the customer what data they need. We also don't have to assume for them because we have all the internet in our cache, as we say, or going through our servers. But we do see a surge in AI companies coming in and asking for different data sets to train their models. These are small companies, medium companies, and also all the way up to the best known AI companies you can think of. They're all coming to us buying data sets. And these are usually different types of data sets from what we would sell some retailer buying pricing data set about different different stores. It's also more a specific site. It's like kind of agnostic. It doesn't really care what's a specific site. They might be looking for high quality or high resolution video of people and scenery. Okay, now they might say, we prefer it will come from site number 1, but if it doesn't, that's fine. It can come from site number 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 10. And then the types of data that we will sell these companies is also different. It's not processed data. It's usually either raw HTML or specific links like video links or image links or things of that, or PDP links or things of that sort. So it's interesting. It's new. Okay, we're still finding our way around building the best suit of products for these needs, but we've already sold quite a few of these data sets, and we have so much data going through our servers, and that gives us the ability to have like a snapshot of the internet, basically, and then to different segments according to what our customers need, and sell them that data. So that's definitely a use case on the rise.
Absolutely. And, I know there's still skeptics out there. For the skeptics in our audience, can you provide like a compelling argument for the example that illustrates the value of, using data collection services?
I think anyone who sells anything of any type needs data to be better at what they're doing. All companies are trying to get a competitive edge, and that can be related to pricing, it can be related to market trends, it can be data that needs to be a core part of the reports you're selling or insights you're selling to your customers, but none of that can be done without data. And better than that, it has to be some data that gives you the competitive edge. It has to be fresh data, data that meets your exact needs, your customers' exact needs. And like I said in the beginning, at the early days when I started working at Bright Data, most companies didn't understand that. But today everyone understands that. And I see that because we have not just the usual tech companies or e-commerce, travel, business companies, and so on. We also have nonprofit organizations who use our services to track, abuse on social networks. We have farmers and cattle ranchers, the big ones, who track trends and the weather and the prices of food and trajectories on different costs and so on. And we have fashion houses using our services to strategize, what should be their next line, how should they price it, and so on. So it's really a must-have for anyone operating online.
It's really a different way to think of, using the infrastructure that we're all familiar with. Most of us are familiar with the routers and the switches and all that different infrastructure, but it's a different use case of how to utilize that infrastructure to do a different goal. Most people just think it's just data flowing from one user to the next, but you're utilizing that same infrastructure that we know for really a greater purpose, a different purpose out there, which is, I find really fascinating.
Yeah, definitely. And just to connect it to the different compliance tools we've been adding, we do keep in mind that some sites, definitely the smaller ones, have their own infrastructure for holding the site and are not equipped for, even though the data is public, right? But they're still not equipped for mass amounts of traffic going through your site. And we acknowledge that. And we want to be like, we want to be a team player and we want everyone in the ecosystem to be successful. And this way, everyone will be successful and we don't want to harm them. So that's why we still monitor that their resources are not impacted by our scraping and always make sure that we allow collecting what's public, but at the same time, we don't allow anything that can harm anyone in the ecosystem.
For people who are interested and want to know more about how data scraping works and the different use cases, where can you point them to go, find out more about this?
Well, there's an abundance of resources today. Putting aside for a second Bright Data, you can just go and ask ChatGPT or ask Google, and there's many resources, again, because everyone is doing it. So there's endless amounts of courses and articles and videos and so on. Also, of course, we'll be happy to help. We offer, for sure, anything that anyone collecting data would need. We have a lot of resources in our website. We have a very good support team that can help directing our customers to the right solutions. And we have great products that our users can use to collect that data. So we're happy to serve any of these needs, of course.
I really appreciate you taking the time and just kind of giving a different perspective on the industry. I think a lot of people in the tech field are familiar with data collection and data scraping, but they might not be familiar with all the nuances that you've covered today. So I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks. I had a good time.
Absolutely. Well, everyone, I really hope you enjoyed this video. And until next time, keep learning.